So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Dan was talking about at the end, which is seed. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of an initiative that is happening at Oregon State University called the Culinary Breeding Network. I'm going to give you some background on that and tell you about some of the activities we have going on. And really, when I think about this, I think it all started with a SARE-funded project that occurred in the years 2005 to 2007. And Alex Stone might be in here, I'm not sure. I know she's at this conference, but she was leading that project. She is, well, the pointer doesn't work, maybe. But she is right there. And this was a project that we affectionately called OSPA. The official title was a lot longer, and I can't remember what it is right now, but the focus really was on working with organic farmers that had a lot of different issues with growing potatoes organically. And so this group of farmers down here, there was a few more than were photographed here, but they're all organic farmers that sold directly to their consumers. So they did farmers markets, they had CSAs, they also sold directly to restaurant customers. Some of them did a little bit of wholesale, but majority they were selling direct, and it was all organic. And they were growing a lot of different things. And this was a very diversified project because we had nutrient management issues that we were trying to address. There were insect pests and diseases that we were all trying to investigate together. And it was participatory, it was very collaborative. And so our farmers told us what it was they were looking for. We knew that they were having a lot of problems with late blight. Late blight, I'm in Oregon, so these are all Oregon and Washington growers, and it's a very conducive environment to late blight. So we looked at all the different kinds of cultural ways that we could manage late blight. For the first season, we were doing this work for 2 seasons, and then following that, we decided we should do some variety trials. So we thought, well, Alex thought, it'd be really fantastic to bring in some potato breeders, and we can talk to them about, what they have available. So we brought in the breeder, who was at the university at the time, and her assistant that had worked there for a long time. We sat down and had this meeting with all of our growers, and they started explaining all the different problems that they were having. We got to late blight, and the potato breeders were saying, "Oh, it's no problem. We've got lots of germplasm for that. We've got a lot of late blight resistant varieties that are out there." I'm like, "Oh, this is really great. We should have talked to these guys at the beginning of the project. Saved us a lot of time." We started talking about different colors of potatoes and different styles of potatoes, and then how they planted and the density and all these questions that growers like to ask when we all get together. And then someone asked the very simple question of, "Well, what's it taste like?" And the breeders replied back and said, "Oh, it tastes terrible." So then all of a sudden it was dead silence, and Alex and I started getting very concerned about how legitimate the growers thought we were. And this was the first time that I had actually started thinking about this, like, wow, I didn't realize that maybe people weren't thinking a lot about flavor. And specifically for potatoes, really, like the potato breeders were breeding specifically for the French fry market, and so they were the flavor was basically going to be salt and oil, right? So it wasn't high on their kind of design brief of what they were looking for. They were more interested in finding varieties that had a lot of uniformity and that had high yields, right? So we did a bunch of variety trials, and we found some varieties that worked well for them. But then the next project that I became involved in was called Novik, and we're moving into our 7th year now, and this is an OREI-funded project, actually, and it involves all the different organizations and universities that are shown here: Organic Seed Alliance, Oregon State University, University of Wisconsin, and Cornell. And at each of these institutions, there's a plant breeder that breeds specifically for organic systems. So they're thinking about a lot of the challenges that the growers that we're working with have issues with. We trial out breeding lines that they're working on, and we trial out a lot of different varieties that we know perform well and ones that we're interested to see how they perform on organic farms And so this photo that you see is a little bit different from the last project, where this one includes a lot of plant breeders and seed growers and farmers, market farmers. So this was pretty fantastic in itself to expand the conversation into talking about seed and actually having the people that are growing seed and breeding varieties and making a lot of decisions. We're now we're all in the same room together and got to talk about different issues. So like I said, this is going into its 7th season, and we work on 6 different crops, and 5 of them are ones that we just work on that were written into the grant, and we always work on, and this is the focus of the breeding work that these organizations are working on. And then we have like a farmer's choice slot. And we really do try to have this project, like all the projects I've been working at OSU since I was hired to work on that potato project, are very collaborative. So here's some photos from some of those projects where we have lots of field days, we have a lot of meetings, we convene people quite a bit. It's all about trying to figure out what the challenges are, talking to people and understanding what it is that they need so that we can address those issues, right? So, knowing that a really big issue and high on the priority list for these growers that I've been working with, flavor is way high up there. I mean, it's typically when I ask, no matter what crop I'm talking about, disease resistance and flavor are usually the first things that come out of their mouths. So we chose, the farmers chose in our region, our Oregon region, they chose this one year sweet peppers because they were to trial. And what they wanted was a hybrid that they were growing a lot of, they couldn't find the seed of anymore and in the quantities that they needed. So they said, we'd really like to try to find an open pollinated substitute for this. So we trialed these, and there were some that were really fantastic. Some had been bred really in our backyard by Frank Morton of Wild Garden Seed, and they performed very, very well on all these farms. But the one thing that we weren't doing, as we were trialing all these things in the farm and seeing how they performed, but we really weren't doing something that was really important to them, which was doing a lot of flavor evaluation. So we brought a ton of peppers to all these people to taste. So what we did was we had 9 different varieties that we were looking at. We had Gypsy, which is the one that we were trying to find a nice substitute, a comparable substitute for. Really the only issue with that variety is they couldn't find enough seed anymore, but they were perfectly happy with it otherwise, so we were comparing things to Gypsy. And at that time, I worked also for one of the farms that we collaborated with, and I knew a lot of chefs from that job because they sold to a lot of restaurants. And so I asked, it's just really simple, just asked every single one of the chefs that I saw that day on that particular Saturday and said, would you please come together and taste peppers? Every single one of them said yes, because chefs really like to eat things. So we got them all together, we had all 9 of them, and we had them taste them because there's a lot of different ways you can use peppers. So we had them taste them sauteed, as well as raw, and then roasted. And then we showed them what they would look like if they were just to buy one, so they saw a sample of what it would look like whole and also halved, so you could see with roasting peppers, they really want the thick walls, right? So we wanted them to be able to see that. When they did this also, they wouldn't see the name Gypsy, it would be a code or something on the other side. So we had them evaluate it. This was the first time I'd ever done anything really like this other than with the potatoes, which we'd done a little bit simpler, and this was asking a lot. So don't take this home and decide you're going to do this because it's a lot to ask people to evaluate for. But we had them evaluate for appearance, flavor, sweetness, texture, and then overall liking on a 1 to 9 scale. And then, gather all the numbers and then put them in the statistics program, right? That's what you're supposed to do as a researcher. And this is the part where I always say that I'm not the best scientific researcher because I really just like to talk to people. So what happened afterward, which was actually pretty cool, was after all done and you don't talk during this process and they turned in the ballots, we asked them, I started asking them what did they like, just to hear it. So before I crunched all the numbers, I would know the answer. And what they started telling me was actually something that was a little bit different than what my numbers were going to be able to get at. These are two varieties. One's called Stocky Red Roaster and one's called Jolene's, that came out of a bigger project that I'm not going to go into right now, but that Frank Morton of Wild Garden Seed had started dehybridizing a pepper because, once again, it was difficult to find the seed. In that case, it was the farmers couldn't find the seed that they wanted untreated, so they could not grow it in an organic system. And get certification. So he started this dehybridization project from this one particular pepper, and he now has maybe like 8 or 9 varieties from that. But this time we were 4 that we were looking at, and they were the ones that really performed the best in the field. They even outperformed the gypsy pepper that was a hybrid that we were trying to find a replacement for. And so it was these two that the chefs really liked the flavor of the best. But then, and I think in the numbers, this one actually, the Jolene's actually came out, he pushed the wrong button, a little bit higher. But the one that they said that they would actually buy and wanted to work with was this one. And it seems really obvious now looking at this picture, but very straight walls and this rounded top, so that, as you can imagine, we're probably all imagining right now cutting this in the kitchen and just trying to determine, like, are you just going to slice the whole thing off? How are you going to cut these little pieces? So as far as efficiency and reduction of waste, this is what the chefs wanted. And that really is not something that ballot was going to get at all. It's more of a trait, and understanding the traits that end users are actually drawn to and want. So, and then I started thinking about Frank. And this is Frank, and he's a really fantastic plant breeder. He's really well known for lettuce, and here he is right here in his lettuce that's going to seed. But as you can see, he's in the field all by himself. This is one of his breeding plots, and these are all full siblings, so they're all brothers and sisters of one another from a cross that he did. And he is making, on his own or with a very small crew of people, making all of these decisions on his own about traits and what it is that people want. And I started thinking, well, wouldn't it be cool if more people were involved in that, because maybe that would help Frank. Maybe he wants that help. And then he wants all those opinions. But also, then people would be involved in the process, and they'd be more interested in plant breeding. And so that's what we did the next year. We did the sweet pepper trial again. We had them taste them all over again, the same varieties. But then what we also did was brought to them this project that Jim Myers, who's the vegetable breeder at Oregon State University, was working on. He was working on a mild or a sweet habanero pepper. And so very, very low heat pepper. And so what he was really doing was trying to find a pepper, one of these tropical peppers that would mature early in our season, which these are long season peppers. We have a short season. So he was just selecting for earliness, and he was also selecting for plant architecture, because a lot of times they lodge over and they split. And so he knew like the efficiency that he was looking for. He knew exactly what the farmers wanted, but then he said, you know, I have no idea what the consumers want, or the people that are going to use this. And these are all different like individuals. Of course, they didn't come off in like nice little piles like this. These are all over the field. So he still had a really diverse population. And so he wanted to know what it was that people, end users and consumers, would be wanting. And so when we did that sweet pepper tasting, we also then had people give their opinions of this. And this was very early on in the process, so that he could be performing those selections early on, because you can't wait all the way to the end and add something, right, in the plant breeding process. So this was really cool. People were very excited to be a part of it, and Jim had a selection event, basically, right? He knew then, from that, he has decided to go with, like, it's a kind of like this kind of appearance, and the flavor also of those peppers that people evaluated, and it will be released hopefully this coming year. So that's when really this kind of got a little bit formalized, and I had, you know, gave a name to it, and started deciding that we need to have more events and venues for these types of conversations. So that's when the Culinary Breeding Network really kind of came about. And the way that right now that this is working is that the CBN is kind of working with a lot of different projects. So you saw how it's working with Novik. Eat Winter Squash is a project led by Alex Stone who is working on a lot of different trials of winter squash and trying to get people very excited about eating winter squash, understanding the distinctions between them. I'll show you some things that we've been doing with that. This is hard to see, but that says Think Barley, so working with the barley breeders that are all over the country to be able to get people excited about barley. And then also we have a small farms program at just south of Portland, Oregon of OSU's. And so really it's about creating relationships with those stakeholders, building community for these research projects, and really having these engaging kind of events that are really fun, but it's kind of a trick because they're also learning a lot too. So this is the squash Saga that went along with the squash project. That is a SARE funded project. And this was, a Saga is an Italian festival. They have them in small villages or bigger villages in Italy, where they just have a huge festival around a local product, like red celery. And this is the place that red celery is grown, and we eat it, and we're very excited about it. And so that's what we were trying to do for winter squash, is get people really excited about it. So it was kind of this culmination of all this information that Alex had learned also in the 2 years of research, and knowing which varieties perform really well in the field for organic farmers, which ones stored the best, which is a really big problem for farmers, and trying to get people excited about eating winter squash when they should, which is the winter time. Putting the winter back in winter squash is what we like to say. And so we had butchery stations where there's a chef that we work with, Tim here, who is like showing people how to safely butcher squash. There's a website too, eatwintersquash.com. You can see videos of this. Lots of different chefs made very simple, easy to use, easy to make and prepare recipes, so people can taste them, people could take home the recipes, and just get really more excited about squash. And we did this at a Fill Your Pantry event, so we knew that we were going to get the right type of people to come to this event and be really excited about it. They're already coming to buy beans and to buy things for storage. We also knew they had to show up, because they had to show up to pick up their order, so we knew 500 people were going to come in, and we were going to basically, any way they turned, they were going to have to see squash. So this was a really successful event, and we're hoping to be able to do more in the future. Barley Day, this is basically a typical kind of field day, which we would talk, about barley trials, and we've all been to field days, so a lot of research, but bringing in bakers and pasta makers and chefs and brewers to really get it more exciting, so that we can just bring in people, not just people that work in farming, but actually like the general public, so they can start understanding why it's so important, and our farmers can be more successful. A couple other things, was something we did with the winter squash also was create a flavor wheel. And so we tasted winter squash raw as well as cooked and pureed, and had people smell, evaluate for aroma and also flavor, and came up with this flavor wheel to get people like really starting to think a lot more about winter squash, so they could differentiate between them, so they could think about different ways of using them and just become more excited, because people get in a rut, right? And they eat the same thing. They eat butternut and delicata maybe over and over and over, and by Thanksgiving they're done. So we really want people to get really excited about these things. It's particularly the things in the winter time that where we are, there's a lot of things to grow. There's a lot of things that farmers can be growing and selling in the winter time, and we need to get people excited about those things. I can send this out too. People always like to take a picture of that. Okay, and then the culmination of what most people think about when they think about the Culinary Network is this variety showcase, which is it has been an annual event for 4 years, and then I'm now trying to squeeze in 2 a year. So it's been always in Portland, Oregon. We just hosted one in Oahu, Hawaii, because we were already there for a workshop. And so what this is pairing up plant breeders with chefs, and plant breeders get a table to be able to curate any way they want their plant breeding work. They're there to somehow be able to articulate the work that they're doing and get people excited about it, and then a chef makes a dish, which is always popular, of course, right? Because people love to eat, to be able to taste something. So here's just 2 of the flyers from last year, and these have all so far been sponsor funded. So here's last year, that was in Portland, Oregon in October. We had 540 attendees. There were 30 of those tables. These are all just the participants, and so these are researchers that are working for, or, doing organic variety trials. They're breeders and they're chefs. And then we had 3 special exhibit rooms this year as well. So just tons of people now really interested in this, I feel like. It's pretty exciting to see. And so this is what one of the tables would look like. These are all different paprika, peppers. That is an in-process breeding project where the breeder is standing there. You get to go up to the table and taste things and look at them and give your immediate feedback to the breeder. And the breeder is oftentimes making selections now, moving forward based on that information. So I'll just cruise through a few of these pictures. This is a pastry chef from Portland, Oregon, who made this cool Parsley apple Granita with Buttermilk Mousse with Frank Martin's Parsley. This started from Granita seed that he received. This is Phil Simon and Lori from she's from Organic Seed Alliance, he's from USDA, and this is a carrot project that they're working on. It's breeding carrots specifically for organic systems and considering flavor and nutrition as well, nutritional content. So some of the times you will actually see varieties that are commercially available on the tables, and sometimes it's asking people for their opinions so that they know what to do in their breeding projects as far as what consumers are interested in. Just another one of Jim Myers with his Tromboncino squash. And so the impact, what we're seeing is a lot of people really, really interested in this. Here, this is how many people, 100 people came to the 2004 event, then 200, then 325, and 540. There could be more, but it freaks me out to have more people than that, so I cut the ticket sales off. Attendees have seen over 225 commercially available cultivars and had the opportunity to taste them, over 170 breeding lines. The Instagram following is really large, and Facebook. I give out a survey to try to see what kind of impact this is having on people, and we are seeing significant impact. And also the first 2 years, I pretty much knew everybody that was in the room. In this last 2 years, I'm wondering who these people are. So it really, and I gather that information, and I can see that it's just becoming members of the public that are interested in food and agriculture. And then we just expanded to Hawaii. Just in March, and first go around had 200 people attend, which was really fantastic. We always also try to keep the cost very low so it can include everyone. And then there'll be an event that's in New York City in September 24th. And this is really catching on. A lot of people are doing this kind of work, right? And so this is my last slide. This is University of Wisconsin, Julie Dawson's group, Seed to Kitchen Collaborative. This is Kitchen Cultivars is happening with Hudson Valley Seed Library and Seed Company. The Bread Lab up at WSU. This is a graduate student at Cornell who's doing some really cool work with kale and consumers. Johnny's Seed in Maine has an initiative to work a lot more with consumers and chefs. And then also Row 7 Seed Company is a company. Michael Mazurek and Dan Barber just started recently. And there's a website and Instagram. There's also an Eat Winter Squash Instagram too for big squash fans.